Hello, I'm Craig from Ctrl.and Advisory. This tutorial series covers the Excel 2019 Expert Curriculum. Download Microsoft's files linked in the description to work through them together as we begin section 2.1, Fill Cells Based on Existing Data. Let's get started. Open up your Excel 2.1 workbook and display the Flash Fill worksheet, and let's do the following. So you'll notice the Flash Fill, we have our two sheets here. We'll just select the Flash Fill on the left-hand side. So Flash Fill is kind of a neat functionality that Excel has, and so we'll work through the examples in the text, and then at the end of the video I'll go through some alternatives that you may find for real-world purposes may provide better capability than necessarily what Flash Fill will do for you. So let's do our first item here, and what they've asked us to do is to go into cell B2, and we're going to type the company name from cell A2 using title case. So that just means that basically that the first letter of each word is capitalized. So let's type this in. Thankfully they gave us a fairly short one, and so what we need to do here is run Flash Fill from the Home tab. So we're here on the Home tab. We go over to Fill here in the editing section, and all the way at the bottom we have Flash Fill. So let's click that. And once we do that, Excel has recognized what we've done here in the first cell, that, hey, all I've done is I've typed this value in a different case, and it's smart enough to continue that pattern all the way down through the rest of the column. So had there been a space here and then more company names, Excel would not have continued past that point. But for as long as it's contiguous data, it's able to follow the same pattern. And sure enough, even when we look down here at the bottom, they are all still title case for us. Next, we're going to go into cell D2, and we're going to type the first name from the full name shown in column C. So let's type Maria here. All right, and then this time what we're going to do is, instead of hitting the Flash Fill from the Home tab, we're going to access it through the Data tab. So the same command is in multiple places. So here's my Data tab selected. Here's my Flash Fill option. We'll click Flash Fill, and sure enough, it has recognized that we've pulled the first group of letters prior to the space and has continued that pattern through the rest of the data in this array. Next, we're going to go over into cell E2 and type the initial. All right, so for Maria, that is a Z, because I'm in Canada here. Now, rather than going through the ribbon with the mouse, because there's so many iterations of this, I'm going to show you how I like to do it, and that is with the keyboard. So remember, when we're alt navigating through the ribbon, we're basically just following the same pattern that we would with the mouse. And the beauty of alt navigating is that you don't have to memorize the commands. As long as you can remember where they're at, like you have to do with the mouse, you can get there just by using your keyboard. So let's hit the Alt key. And now all of the hot letters for the ribbon are exposed. So we'll do it the same way we did the first time. Let's go to our Home tab, which is an H. And then we can see Fill is over there, and that's an FI. And we can go to F. And now we Flash Filled it just by using our keyboard. Next, we're going to go into cell F2. And we're going to type in the last name. And once we've done that, now in this case there is a kind of a memorized shortcut. So if you do Flash Fill a lot, rather than even navigating through the Alt keyboard shortcuts, you can go to the direct shortcut, which is Ctrl E. And once we do Ctrl E, again the same thing happens for us. Now, for most purposes, I prefer the Alt shortcuts because then I don't have to memorize them. But if it's something that you're doing a lot, you're going to find that that Control E is going to be slightly quicker for you and may be the better solution for you. All right, lastly, we're going to go to this wordy one here. So we're going to go into cell H2. And so what they want us to do with all those words is just basically type it in a North American phone number format. So what that's going to look like is an open bracket, area code, close bracket, space, next three, 555 and 7605. Now this time, rather than using the ribbon commands, they would like us to drag down with the fill handle. So we'll drag that all the way down to the bottom, and you'll notice what it's done by default is just iterated up by one number. So it's taken that first one, and every time it's added a single number and counted up until we've got to 27. And so that's not matching what's over here. So we can go over to this contextual menu that's popped up, this autofill options. When I select this, there is a flash fill option at the bottom. And when I click this, it now shows us, or it now has learned and says, oh, okay, you don't want us just to count up by one. You want us to look to the left and convert that lengthy number into this particular format. So this wraps up the requirements for the textbook. If you want to continue watching on from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a couple other ways that we could get the same results with maybe a few benefits and avoiding a few of the drawbacks of flash fill. So if you receive a static data array like what we started with here, flash fill is great. It saves a lot of time. It allows you to Excel to quickly learn what you're doing and continue it on. But there's a couple drawbacks. So if you're in a situation where your data changes over time or evolves, you may want something that's formula based in order to provide these capabilities for you. So let's say, for example, let's say we have another company to add here. So we're going to add another grocery store. So let's call this Craig's Groceries. Oh, I'll get that all into uppercase, grocery. You'll notice that it doesn't automatically copy down the pattern that we did. So if I now want it in proper case or title case here, as they call it, I would actually have to retype it, or I'd have to go back and flash fill it again. So it's not something that Excel automatically will do for us. We have to take that additional step. The other thing is, what if we realize, oh geez, this Hungry Coyote import store is actually Hungry Wolf import store, and you'll notice that Excel hasn't changed that for us. It's kept it in the last format. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the values here in this column, and I'll show you an alternative way that you could do this using a formula. So this one's pretty straightforward. There is a function called proper, so we can just type equals PROP, and there's proper. I'm going to tab, and that brings it active into my cell here, and I'm just going to arrow to the left at B's Beverages, and hit enter, and sure enough, there we have B's Beverages. I can fill this down now, and it changes all of the ones here on the left into the proper case format. So it's very similar to what we had before. The advantage being is that if this is not white clover, that this is pink clover market. When I change that, you'll notice over here in this column that it is updated for me. So it's just a little bit more powerful and not really a whole lot more work than doing the flash fill in the first place. Also, if I need to add another record, I can call this Bob's Discount Foods. Excel has actually recognized that I've added another, and it has automatically brought that formula down for me. So I don't even have to go to that second step in order to drag or fill that formula down. Now in the name section, we can do a couple alternative solutions for it here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of all the names that we created before. The first thing we'll do is a text to column. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of these names. I'm going to copy them. I'm just going to put them in the first column here. And what we're going to go into is, let's go data. And where's my text to columns? That's E there in the middle. So now that I've opened up the text to column wizard, we'll start stepping through this. So it gives us a couple options depending on the data source that we want. If you've never used this functionality before, it's worth checking out. I've actually used it quite a bit. It allows us to choose two different types of file format, or excuse me, data formats. One is what they call delimited, and that's where there's a character that marks where the column splits are going to go. And the other is a fixed width. So a fixed width, we can just say after so many characters, make a split, and after the next many characters, make another split. But it doesn't recognize a particular character to cue that. So in this case, we're going to go with the delimited option. We'll hit next here. And then it says, okay, well, what is your delimiter? In this case, when I look at my data, I know that there's a space. So I'm going to select space. Now it could be a tab, it could be a semicolon, commas, it could be another. I could type in whatever one I want here, basically. And so what happens when we hit next? It shows us, okay, well, do you want to make it a particular type of data? Sometimes it's handy if you have a date, you want to keep it in the date format, or if you want to force it as text. I'll just leave it as general, and then it kind of just leaves it alone. So once I hit finish here, it has now split what was the full name here into 3 separate columns wherever there was a space. So this is possibly faster than when we used the flash fill, and it probably is because we had to type out all those names previously. But it suffers from the same flaw in that if I have to change Maria here to Mary, I'll slowly type this out for us, it doesn't update the first name here. So it's not great for a more dynamic type of data where you may have to make some changes to it. It's great if it's static. Same thing if I add a new name at the bottom here. Again, there's no recognition that it needs to continue that further down the column. All right, so to make this more dynamic, I'm going to be frank, there's no real simple way to do it. Now, it's not necessarily difficult, but I'll show you a way that I might do this. And you know what? There may be better ways to do this than what I'm going to show. And if so, leave it in the comments. I'd love to learn how you would handle this. So when we did the text to columns, we noticed that it picked out where there was spaces. And I'm going to use that same technique to figure out where the first name ends. And there's a function called search. So I'm going to type in search here and bring that in. And what it's telling me is it's saying, hey, what text do you want to find? And so in this case, I want a space. So I put a double quote, a space, and then a second double quote. And then the next term in it is where am I searching? So I'm going to say in this full name column here. And I'll hit enter. And so obviously 5 isn't what I want, but when I'm kind of iterating some functionality, I'll typically step into it like this. I'm like, okay, so now I know where the space is, and that's at position 5. Now what I can do is I can integrate a new formula into this. So I'm going to hit use what's called left. All right, and so left is going to bring a certain number of characters starting from the left in another cell. So in this case, it's the terms are what text are we going to bring in? So I'm going to click C2 again, and then it says what number of characters. And I'm not going to type the number of characters. I'm just going to leave this search function in that position because I know that that is bringing in the position of the space. So let's hit the close bracket here at the end and hit return. And sure enough, we have Mary here. So now that we have Mary, let's bring that down. And it's picked up all the first names for all of these characters. Now, if I change Mary back to Maria, sure enough, Maria still stays in the first column. So that was fairly easy in order to get that to happen. It starts getting trickier as we go into the initial and last name sections. All right, so moving on to the initial, things start getting a little bit more complicated here. So we know how to figure out where that space is. And so in our next formula, we're going to use that to tell us where the middle initial begins. So I've made a note of the formula down here at the bottom just so that I don't get lost myself. And you'll notice it looks fairly intimidating, but I'll try and work through how I got it for you. So the other thing that the search will do is it lets us tell us where we want the search to start. So let's go into the search again here. We'll hit equals search. All right, and so you'll notice here it says there's the find text, there's the within text, and then there's also a start number. So we're going to use that start number to our benefit here because what we want to do is find out where that first space is, but then also where the second space is, and then return the characters that are between those two numbers. All right, so let's start by finding that space again. We're going to find it within this text here, and when I look at it, there is our number 6, because it's 6 now because Maria is longer than Mary was. So we know that's where our first space is. But what we want to do is we now want to go back into this another search, and I'm just going to nest them here. So we want to use the same find text. And we want, we're going to use the same find text, which is the space. We're going to use C2 again, because that's where we're looking. And then I'm going to use this initial search as this start number, where to begin. Now, the trick to this is I can't just use this. Well, let's just use it and see what happens. You'll notice that it's given me the 6 again, because what it's done is it's gone to 6. It says, hey, try and find a space. And it's like, well, hey, there's a space right here at 6. So what we need to do is actually add a 1 to that, and that will stay constant, so we can add it in here. And so now it's telling me that my second space is at position 9. Okay, so now I have my second space position, and if I drag this down here, you'll notice that the second space changes in each of these names. So I have the second space now. So what I'm going to do is use what's called a mid formula. And so a mid is going to return the characters between two numbers. Or excuse me, it's going to give me where to start, and then we're going to have to tell it how many digits to go. So here's our mid. And it says that, okay, what text do we want to return? Well, we want to return again from our favorite cell C2 here. Then it asks us where do we want to start. So what we want to do is start where our first space is. We actually want to start just past it. So we're going to do the search. We're going to do our space. We're going to do C2. And then we're going to do our +1 again. Okay, because we don't want it right on the space. We don't want space initial. We want it starting just at the initial. All right, so now it's saying how many characters. Okay, so I know that this term here is the 9. Okay, so what I want to do is for it to return the number of characters that is the difference between this 9 and this initial search right here. And so all I really need to do is subtract this particular term, because I know this is the starting point. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to enter this in, and we'll see if it works. And if it doesn't, I'm going to delete the video, and I'm going to start again, and you'll never know. So, all right. All right, so it turns out you will know when I make a mistake here. All right, so what I need to do in order to make this not be the z.and is I've just misplaced a comma. So the comma should go here after this +1, and then I need to remove one of my commas from the back here. And now when I hit enter, I have the initial that I want. So you'll notice that anytime, I'm not a big fan of elaborate formulas like this, and so I would normally try and avoid them whenever possible. And you can get really deep into these rabbit holes of trying to figure out ways to split out data from a text. And oh boy, I've had to pull apart some really messy text strings into component parts, and you kind of just get experience by iterating through it, and when it doesn't work the way you want, you play around with it and see if you can get it to give the result that you want. So now that we've got this simple way of getting an initial, you'll understand why flash fill is so powerful, in that it is able to basically figure that out just by seeing what I did. It's just not dynamic, which is really the shortfall that we're trying to resolve. All right, let's see if we can get this last name figured out here. So I'm going to try and do this live here. And what we can do, though, there's a couple shortcuts that we can do. Is this time we don't have to use spaces, because it was getting unwieldy that there was 2 of them. What we know is that there is a period or a dot after each initial. So let's use that as our search term here. So let's hit equals search. And this time, I don't even know if I need to put in quotes or not, but I will, and see if that happens. So let's find that, see if we can find that period within, okay, perfect. So there's our period. It's showing up in cell 8, and sure enough, it's dynamic. It's it's tracking each of them differently here, so I know where that period is. So we are going to use another function called length, and that's going to actually tell me the total number of digits in here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the length minus this value and use that in my mid function to tell me to tell it which amount of digits to bring. So with that in mind, I'm going to go back into the formula bar here. I'm going to type in my mid, and I'm going to say C2. And what's our start number? Well, our start number is going to be this search term, but I don't want it to start right at the period. I want it to start, I believe, 2 characters to the right. So let's start with that +2. And then it wants to know the number of characters. So I'm going to take the length of the cell, so that's len, okay, of C2. Okay, so that tells me how many total digits, but I just want the difference from our Z to the N. So I basically just want these last, in this case, 6 digits. So let's see if I can get this figured out. So we've got our length, and I'm going to subtract our search term dot C2 +2. And let's try this and see if it works. Oh, I've got too many brackets. Ah, look at that. First go, and it worked for me here. So let's split this out a little bit here, just to go through it again. So our mid function is telling us that saying in this cell we want to bring in the characters between 2 numbers. So we're saying cell C2 is the text that we're looking at. We have a start number, and our term for start number here is this search term. So it's taking, it's looking for that period out of that same text string, and then it's adding 2 digits to us because that takes us from the period and the space. Let's just start with the A. And then for the number of characters section of the term, we have our length is the total number of digits in that cell, and we're subtracting where that period is at. And it's just bringing the difference between them. So I've got Anders at the bottom here. Let's drag this down. And now I have all of the names. If I need to change Helen's name here to Helen J. Smith, you'll notice that these 2 columns also update to match with it. All right, so that was complicated. You're not going to have to do anything that involved on the exam, but that gives you a little bit of idea where if you get created and use some of the functions that are already in Excel, that you can start splitting out some of these text strings that show up in a database for you and start breaking them out into components that might be more useful for whatever professional purposes that you have. All right, now with these phone numbers, there is a little bit of a trick to this. Normally when I'd see a set of phone numbers here, what I would just do is go into the Style menu, or excuse me, the Format number, and go down to Special. I would select Phone Number, and then click OK. And normally what I'd see in this sample here is it would show me the format that I'm searching for, and it's not happening. When I click OK, nothing happens. And so we have a situation here where for whatever reason, Excel, even though it's numbers, Excel is treating it as if it's just text, and basically treating it no different than if it was alphanumeric letters. And so it doesn't allow us to put that special formatting. So what I can do in cell H2, if I just try and go here, I end up with the same value. And if I try and do my special formatting, to phone number, it still doesn't work. So the workaround for this is to use the value function. If I go value G2, it now takes whatever data was in here and it changes it back into a numeric format. So now here's my phone number. It's in the right format. I can drag this down. It's got them all there. And if one of them has to change, it's now dynamic. Of course, it's changed it into the number format over here as well. So there are a couple little workarounds, a couple little tricks. I'll be honest, I had to Google to figure out how to get it back into the the numeric format. It's a problem I'd had in the past. I knew there was a workaround, but you can never just always have everything at your fingertips, and Google is always there to help you out. Anyways, I know this has been lengthy. Hopefully you're able to see a little bit of the thought process that goes into solving some of these data management problems, and it'll help you when in your real professional life. Not so much on the test these things, but when your boss asks you to do something, hopefully now you've seen a couple other options to solve some problems you might be facing. Anyways, thanks for watching. This is Craig with Shortcut.and Advisory.